been a while since we've looked at any game in the Dynasty Warriors series, let alone any game from Koei Tecmo on this channel, and for good reason. Outside of Neo and a few other titles including Samurai Warriors, it's been a rough go lately for the niche gaming company. Dynasty Warriors 9 was a critical failure. Romance of the Three Kingdoms 14 and especially Taichi were step downs from their previous iterations. Despite this, I was curious if Koei Tecmo could salvage the series with another solid entry in the Empire series. I've always preferred the Empire's games to the main series, so I was excited about what would be included here. Will it be a return to form, or will the series continue to plummet to mediocrity? As always, you're greeted with the main menu and can start up a scenario by selecting Conquest Mode. For the base game, you're provided with 7 historical scenarios and 1 fictional scenario in a gathering of heroes. All in all, pretty standard for an Empires game. As always, we will start with the Yellow Turban Rebellion, but I decided to mix it up this time, going with the legendary Zhu Rong and her Boomerang of Death. One thing I do appreciate is the intro cutscene with each scenario, summarizing the state of affairs and the major conflicts. Does a great job getting the player up to speed with what is going on. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to confirm if any unique battles happen similar to previous Empires games. Before I get into my Zhu Rong game properly, I want to discuss what one could do as a free officer. As a free officer, you can, well, not much. I mean, you can form a vagrant force and participate in battles happening in your location, but there's nothing really special here compared to serving a lord. For a game that doesn't add much to the formula, they even forgot to copy and paste everything from the previous Empires game. But I'm getting way too ahead of myself here. Let's follow the life and times of Zhu Rong. She starts out as an officer under Mang Huo, and not married to him surprisingly, so we can eventually pick who we want to settle down with. For now, it's basically the same Dynasty Warriors 8 Empires. The ruler will pick the next territory to focus on capturing, and you try to complete objectives to prepare yourself. If you've watched my Dynasty Warriors 8 Empires review from a ton of years ago, you can basically do the same thing here depending on your officer's title. Each title unlocks different policies as well as the rank you are in the kingdom. It's an overall okay system, but the lack of expansion on it is a letdown. One of the few new features in this game adds the ability to go on a stroll. This allows you to run around the open world of China and speak with various officers to form bonds, ask them to join your faction, and even join the stroll with you. Somehow, even more than Dynasty Warriors 9, the world is very bare bones with very little hidden within. This could have easily been a way to obtain some rare mounts, catching them in the wild, similar to a ton of open world games with this mechanic. New weapons are obtained from having a certain gem level, so there's no crafting or anything interesting there. I'm just longing for the days when the weapon upgrade system similar to Dynasty Warriors 5 Empires and Samurai Warriors 2 Empires gets brought back. It'll never happen, but I can dream, right? Eventually, you'll be headed into battle. One thing I really like is the ability to pick a plan before battle. Early on, you'll have no plan, but will eventually get the option to choose one. These can be very effective and will be different depending on the officer suggesting it. It also helps to give a bit of variation to each battle to help them all stand out, even if the general flow is the same. And by the general flow, I mean capturing bases on the outside of the castle, which will create siege engines to create an opening. This can be a siege tower reaching the walls or a ram destroying the gates. Once this happens, you'll be able to use your grappling hook and can kill the main commander and call it a day. Rinse and repeat. This would honestly be fine, as many of the Warriors games can get repetitive over time, but often find a way to remain entertaining. Unfortunately, Dynasty Warriors 9 Empires reaches this point way too quickly. A lot of this has to do with the oversimplified combat system. You would think Koei Tecmo learned this lesson already in Dynasty Warriors 6 with the Renbu system, but apparently they just purged that game from their minds. While I don't despise that game as much as the rest of the fanbase does, the simplification of the combat system as well as the lack of unique weapons was a huge issue. Both issues plagued a majority of Dynasty Warriors 9 and seep in here as well. The tried and true combat system is gone and replaced by using LB as a face button to perform certain moves like a special attack or lifting the enemy up in the air. It just lacks the satisfaction of timing a combo and positioning yourself for maximum efficiency. That's what made the combat so enjoyable, seeing troops fly away with a well-placed charge attack. And while some unique weapons of characters have returned, there's still a lack of them given the amount of characters on the roster. It's just such a shame that Koei Tecmo decided to ignore one of the biggest issues in Dynasty Warriors 9 outside of the launch date bugs. Thankfully, the stratagem system from the past games returned. This allows you to perform an action that consumes a strategy point. This can range from casting a lightning bolt to healing yourself and your allies. It's honestly fun pulling these off for maximum effectiveness. I would recommend for one of your equipped stratagems to be one for healing, as items aren't dropped very often. I gotta say this before it escapes me, The game just looks like butt and cheese. I get that Warriors games have always lagged behind graphically, but it seems to not even be improved at all from 8, and many of the generic officers and soldiers look like models from the early PS2 era. The cutscenes themselves look fine when the Musu officers are involved, but outside of that, it's just very lackluster. For the audio department, the game lacks any English dubbing. This can be seen as a negative, but the English dub was so bad in Dynasty Warriors 9 that it was ultimately for the better. The Japanese voice acting at least has its veterans of the series that have voiced the characters for what feels like their entire lives, or maybe just my entire life. One thing I really appreciate is the inclusion of songs from past games. Anytime classic tracks like Welcome to China or the Camp Tropics are played, it enhances the experience tremendously. Honestly, even without these nostalgic tracks, the music is still pretty good. Alright, so back to the magnificent Zhu Rong. Outside of making friends and gaining deeds, Zhu Rong rose through the ranks and became Grand General of the army. This allowed her to do basically as much as the ruler can outside of a few policies. Instead of waiting on the ruler to launch an invasion, she could take those matters in her own hands. With her power came the temptation to betray Meng Huo and strike out on her own, but eventually Meng Huo decided to step down and give control to her. I'm honestly not even sure why he would do that, but I guess the game needed to give you something so you don't languish as an officer forever. For that, she can now take her place as the rightful queen of Nanzhong and conquer the rest of China. Like Dynasty Warriors 8 Empires, you can set the priorities of what you want your officers to do. Seriously, the more I talk about the previous installment, the more I just would rather stop this review and go play it now. Outside of the battlefield, she grew closer to the little conqueror known as Sun Ce. She even saved him on a hunting trip, and he eventually proposed to the fire goddess. I gotta say, this isn't the first couple I think of when it comes to fan fiction, but honestly it works out for me the more I think about it. They even had a kid by the end of the chaos, but I'll get to that later. Honestly, there wasn't much to happen until the eventual conquest, outside of the emperor asking to be sheltered. Zhu Rong refused as her loyalties lie with herself and the Nanman tribes. She will be the leader and refuses to submit to anyone. Eventually, the last faction, Ma Teng of all things, was defeated and the land was finally united under Zhu Rong. The ending was overall unimpressive until I found out more after the credits. Zhu Rong was fighting pregnant, but somehow her daughter came out healthy and got rid of the ugliness from the previous game's kid. And even though I wasn't able to use her in the conflict, I was able to save her as an edit officer, so I appreciated that. As expected, you can also create your own officers and guide them through the chaos. Unfortunately, the edit mode feels incredibly stripped down and bare. There are only a handful of items and outfits to choose from. For hairstyles, there are a few, but nothing to the level of Neo 2's customization, let alone that game's graphics. Of course, if you want more, there is DLC, but I feel it to be fabulously overpriced and just not worth it. If you asked me after Dynasty Warriors 9 came out if I would look forward to a Dynasty Warriors 10, I would say absolutely. After this though, I beg to differ. This is easily one of the most underwhelming and boring games I've played. I'm not sure why the Samurai Warriors series continues to do so well, but the same cannot be applied to Dynasty Warriors. At this rate, Koei Tecmo should just focus on bringing in their back catalog to Steam to at least remind us of what was a proper Warriors title back in the day. Until then, thank you for watching, and this is Powerhouse, signing off.